Welcome to another episode of the State of African Agriculture. Today we have Dr. Jessica Fanzo. She is the Distinguished Professor of Global Food and Agricultural Policy and Ethics at the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and the Nitze School of Advanced International Studies. She currently serves as the co-chair for the Global Nutrition Report and is a team leader for the high-level panel of experts for food systems and nutrition for the UN Committee on Food Security. She is part of the team that developed the Food Systems Dashboard, and today we'll be discussing the Food Systems Dashboard. Thank you. Jess, thank you for joining me today. And let's start from the very beginning. You're a distinguished professor of global food and agricultural policy and ethics at Johns Hopkins, and you led the team that wrote the UN high-level panel of experts on food systems and nutrition report. So while doing this, you realized or you identified that you need the food system dashboard. What is the food system dashboard? What exactly is it?
So the food systems dashboard is a platform where we've curated and pulled together distinct food data, and it's on a dashboard, meaning it's visually appealing, it's easy to navigate, it's right in front of you, and you can start looking at data from around the world related to food systems from every country. And it was something that Lawrence Haddad, the lead at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, and myself, we were both working on this food systems report. We felt there was a real gap in that it's very hard to find food systems information. There's a lot of food data out in the world. There's a lot of databases. The problem is that there's too much, that it becomes really difficult to navigate. So the food systems dashboard was really built to bring together select food data, more related to the things that we care about, nutrition and health, environmental sustainability and climate, and pull that together in a very visually appealing, easy to understand way to help aid decision making.
Great. So how does, I'm asking out online, so how do you get the data? Where does the data come from?
It all comes from public resources. So a lot of our data comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN organization responsible for collecting a lot of food data around the world. World Bank, UNICEF. We have some large databases that are owned by academics that they put out there publicly, but all of the data that we have is publicly available, and we've just pulled it from other databases and curated it into a smaller, more distinct place that is on a dashboard.
Interesting. So what exactly is the dashboard? Who's your target market? What exactly is the dashboard for? How does it work? Can we get into that?
So originally, the target user was policymakers, because policymakers don't have time to mine databases and figure out what kind of data is most relevant for their country to make decisions. So our original proposal was that this database could be used for policymakers, so they didn't have to take the time to figure out what was the most important data to be able to look at how their food systems are performing. And so what we did was we designed the dashboard around what we call the 3 Ds. So it's describe, diagnose, and decide, with the policymaker in mind. So the dashboard describe, it allows for people to look at food systems. What do they look like? What are their characteristics? Diagnosis, how are they performing? And decide is, okay, well, if they're performing this way, what kind of actions can I take to improve them? So it's the 3 Ds. Now, over time, we've realized a lot of different people use the dashboard. Researchers definitely use it. Students use it. NGOs, UN entities use it. So it's not just policymakers, but a whole range of users are using it. I think researchers particularly like it, of course, because researchers like data. And maybe, that's not our real target audience, but researchers are using it as well.
And I would like to add private sector because I actually looked at it to see, like in Nigeria, what is lacking, what are the things we need to work on. So
yeah,
probably all stakeholders, you said.
Yeah, and maybe private sector holds a lot of data themselves. A company collects a lot of data on what are the demands of their consumers and what do the supply chains look like for their products. We don't have a lot of private sector collected data on there because a lot of times it's proprietary, but I still think the dashboard's useful for them to look overall at food system characteristics of countries and how they're performing.
Okay. So this was launched in 2020. 2020?
Yeah,
Yes.
during COVID.
Yeah, I
Not a
remember
great
that.
time to launch a big project, but
Yeah.
we did it anyway.
But it was good because everybody was online. So I think
Yeah,
it was,
it's true.
yeah. So it depends. It has its win-win. So I wanted to ask, so how is it in terms of, the current status of the dashboard in terms of acceptability, the reach, are people using it? How is it informing better policy recommendations, particularly among African nations?
Yeah, so when we first launched the dashboard, it was a little clunky. And over time, we've gotten a lot of feedback from users of fixing this, fixing that. So we've done a whole kind of redesign of the dashboard based on user feedback. And we continually tried to add more data that's relevant to users. So we keep making improvements on it. We keep adding features to it, and I'll show you some of those features. But we've gotten a lot of feedback again from multiple users. People use it in their classrooms as teaching tools.
Okay.
Some countries are using it to inform what kind of data gaps they have. Africa is very keen to use the dashboard in developing their own subnational dashboards. So we've been working, for example, with Nigeria to establish a subnational dashboard.
Okay.
Because the food systems dashboard has data that sits at the country level, the national level. But we know that food systems are very micro. People are engaging in food systems every day. People are going, Lagos has a massive food system, and it looks very different from a food system in the northern part of the country. So subnational data, more disaggregated data, is really important to make country decisions. And so Nigeria is developing a subnational dashboard, all developed in Nigeria. We're just helping assist them on the design of the dashboard so it's user friendly. But that's a great example of where the dashboard inspired countries to be able to start working on their own more relevant local dashboards. So that's, I think, one of the biggest successes that we have. That's also happening in Mozambique. It's happening in Indonesia, very complex, many islands. Bangladesh, and there's one other country. But so that to me is the really exciting part, is that countries are using the global dashboard and deciding, well, I want this in my country, but I want to look at it at a much more localized level.
And I like that it also makes you aware of what the current issues are. So it's not just, okay, this is what is pertaining to this local government or this community and stuff. So it's a good report of their reality on ground. So let's get into it. And I just want to ask you, from a policymaker from Nigeria, and I want to use the system, how does that work?
Great. So here's the dashboard. It's foodsystemsdashboard.org. And this is the homepage that you get. And so this is a collaboration between the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, Hopkins, where I am, and FAO, but we have many other partners. So there's many ways to enter into the food system dashboard. So let me first just show you this global data view. So if you're here, what this allows for you to do is look at any indicator. And what you'll see Actually, let me go first to here. What we have is this site, this specific part, it's called information. And it allows for you to look a bit at information related to what are food systems and what's the dashboard.
Okay.
But if you look at this framework, we've mapped out indicators along this framework. So we've got a lot of indicators on food supply chains, food environments, individual factors, consumer behavior. And so we've mapped indicators using this different framework that was based on the high-level panel of experts. And so when you're looking at this world map view, you can see all of the different indicators across drivers of food systems change, food supply, so that's agriculture production, storage and transportation of food, processing and packaging of food.
Very detailed.
Yeah, food environments, food affordability. You've got tons of indicators, right? Individual factors, so economic factors, physical factors of individuals who are engaging with food systems, and of course, outcomes. And this is a whole range of environmental impacts of the food system, food security outcomes, diet outcomes. So what this map shows right now is the percentage of the population who cannot afford what is considered a healthy diet. That means meeting your nutritional needs and being health promoting. So as you can see, the darker the blue, the more the country cannot afford a healthy diet, percentage of that population. So look at sub-Saharan Africa. Here you got the DRC, 90% of the population cannot afford a healthy diet. Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
Whereas you go to, Argentina, and only 11% of the population cannot afford what is considered a healthy diet. So that just shows you the inequities of who can and who can't afford a healthy diet. So
there's a big difference.
Yeah, so you can look at this
Africa
map.
and other countries.
Yeah, you can look at this map view. You can download the data. You can look at it as a graph. You can look at this figure as a graph. You could filter by only low-income countries, or you could filter by rural food systems, or very industrialized food systems like the United States. You can filter by just looking at a handful of countries, like let's put in Western Africa. And you can look at, we've got Western Africa, and then you can add Nigeria. So you can start populating a graph if you wanted to. You've got Ghana. So you can start to play with the data in all kinds of ways. You can also look at it as a table view, and also disaggregate and select key data. So the other entry point is what we call the country profiles. And what this allows for is to look just at a snapshot of a country. So let's look at Nigeria. And what you can see here is that what this top graph shows is total greenhouse gas emissions coming from agriculture, and this is showing Nigeria. What you can also do is compare Nigeria to Western Africa. So you can see Nigeria is emitting a lot more greenhouse gases than Western Africa. And then you can look at the world average. So Nigeria is pretty high
there, yeah.
Right? What you can also do is let's look at, for example, adult obesity. Here's obesity in Nigeria. It's going up and up and up over time, as very closely aligned to West Africa, but it's still below the world average. So when you look at this data, you can ask yourself, well, is this bad? Is Nigeria, obviously the upward trajectory of obesity is not a good sign. But what you can look at is a scorecard. And if you click here, you can see that the green is not an alarming situation for Nigeria.
Okay.
Whereas if you start to get into the yellow or the red, that becomes a warning sign.
Okay.
And you can see Nigeria is tipping very closely into the yellow category. So we've done that, the scorecard, or what we call the diagnose, for a whole range of indicators. And here on the left, you can see the green being not a challenge area and the red being a challenge area for Nigeria. So for example, here's anemia. Nigeria has a very high anemia rate among women of reproductive age. 55% of women are anemic. And what we've also done is given some recommended policies and actions that Nigeria can take to address anemia. Some food system actions like biofortification, implementing food fortification programs, providing low-income households, particularly women, animal husbandry and training, because animal source foods are a good source of iron. So this country scorecard allows for someone who's interested in looking just at a specific country, how their food system is performing. And then we have, a couple of different tools on here, like some policies and actions that you could take across agriculture and international trade to improve food systems, not only for improving diets and health, but for environment and climate. And then last, we have this comparison tool that allows for you to select indicators and look over time at how different indicators come together across countries and see the correlation of different indicators. And that's a little bit more of a sophisticated tool that users can play with. So that's really kind of the dashboard in a nutshell. Very easy to navigate, very detailed, and just very action oriented, as opposed to just this massive database with thousands of data that doesn't provide or elicit how food systems are doing and performing, and also what you can do about it to ensure that they're improving for
and you pretty much have everything you're looking for. And like, how long did it take to get it done?
I think we started this in 2018. So it took about 2 years to get the dashboard up and running. And we worked with a group called iTech to design it. They're based out of Delhi. They're a fantastic NGO working on data visualizations. And so then we launched it in June of 2020. And then we spent about another kind of year of just getting it out there, but also getting feedback. And this new redesign took us about a year with the diagnosing that country profile of the red, green, yellow. That took about another year of work. So
what I also like is, for each topic, I like how you just went to the anemia part and you can see, okay, this is what, for instance, Nigeria, this is high, and this is some of the things, the government needs to focus on, and how do we do that? That's another topic. So it's a very good, actually, very detailed. So that was good. I'm just so surprised with the data, with the amount of data that you have on there. One of the things I also wanted to ask is, knowing from your experience, the food system is interconnected with health, environment, economy, and policy. Policy interventions that address this aspect are bound to impact many outcomes of the food system and what it contributes to. So what are some of the examples of, policies from maybe a country has used based on based on the food dashboard system? Have you used to implement or create new policies? Or what do you think are some of the policies that can possibly impact the food system?
Yeah, I don't think we have really any direct evidence of the dashboard being very important in the creation of a policy. What I hope, though, is that as countries develop food policies, that they use data to maybe course correct. So if they see that their subsidy policy for their agriculture subsidy policy has been going on for 10 years, and they see that greenhouse gas emissions are going up and up and up. Maybe that's a chance, and there's data that is used to make that conclusion. The dashboard could be used to maybe course correct. How do we ensure that subsidy policies are more environmentally sustainable? So I don't think, as far as I know, we've had any concrete examples of where the dashboard has motivated policymakers to create a policy. What we've seen more is that the data is used to inform decisions about changing a program or potentially spurring attention to an underserved area of food systems. So we've done some work in the Black Seas countries. There's a lot of work going on in Mozambique and Nigeria and Bangladesh, where the dashboard has been used to say, wow, we haven't really looked at environmental sustainability from the food system, and we see that we're all in red. What do we do about that? So I think the dashboard's used more to elicit stakeholder dialogue, and there's conversation going around the countries using data. So more data-driven dialogue that could potentially inform policymaking. So from a policy being made in the dashboard, there's a long pathway of dialogue and discussion, but we hope that generating policies becomes more and more data-driven. And that's sort of the idea of the dashboard, is that evidence data-driven policymaking.
Okay, and I think I know in Africa, there's also the lack of awareness. So even us as an organization, we have this Nutrition Conversation Africa, where it's some of the things we'll probably talk about to advocate and create awareness on this topic. So it's actually a good platform for us to use. So I'm sure people are using it, not necessarily letting you know, but definitely people are definitely using it, and we'll definitely be using it as an organization. So to wrap this up, what is the one advice you like to give policymakers, stakeholders? I think you said that already, on the food dashboard system. If there's one thing you want them to know about it, how to use it, what is your one thing?
We're going to be putting a lot of case studies up in the next month of how you can use the dashboard. And the way we do it, and what I think is most useful for policymakers, is that you see a problem in your country. So let's say, wow, I didn't realize that sugar intake in Gabon is so high. Why is that? And what the dashboard allows for you to do is to walk backwards from that harmful health outcome, being high sugar intake, and what is the food system contributing to that? And the dashboard allows for you to walk backwards and look at, okay, well, if sugar intake is high, why? Well, let's look at ultra processed foods. Are the retail sales very high in Gabon on that? What's the income that people are spending on ultra processed foods? So the dashboard allows for you to take an outcome that you're concerned about and see how the food system is potentially contributing to that outcome, and how can you then fix it. And the dashboard allows you to walk that pathway, walk that road, and think about how you can change outcomes that benefit human health and the environment.
Jess, thank you so much for your time. And I'm hoping that, this has been very informative. I'm hoping that, policymakers, especially in Africa, because I saw that map and it was actually alarming. And hopefully that both policymakers in Africa or even all over the world will use it and start working towards actions to solve the issues that we have on the ground. So thank you very much for that information. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.